All right. Hello, friends, and welcome back. So, I just saw Fast and Furious 9, F9, over the weekend. It was a pretty magical experience being back in the theaters. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the actual movie going experience later and what I thought about the movie. Today, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the return of Han, how the movie did it, how they explained it, and whether or not justice for Han was served. Now, if you have no idea what justice for Han is, if you have no idea who Han is, I have another video I'll link to where I kind of go into the backstory of the character, everything that happened to him in the series, and why it was such a big deal that he came back. So, long story short, Han, beloved character in the Fast and Furious franchise, dies at the end of the third movie, Tokyo Drift. However, he is so popular and the director, Justin Lin, likes him so much that he ends up deciding when he makes more Fast and Furious movies that he's going to have all those movies take place before Tokyo Drift so that Han can still be alive and take part in the adventures in a little bit in 4 and then more larger roles in 5 and 6 before he dies. So, the first time you see Han die is in Tokyo Drift. He is just getting chased by this kind of low-level Yakuza wannabe who he works for, and in the process of that car chase, he gets T-boned by a random car, and his car explodes, and he dies. It is then later revealed that at the end of Fast and Furious 6, that his death wasn't an accident, but was in fact actually an act of murder by this character, Deckard Shaw, who's played by Jason Statham. And then it's sort of like, oh, okay, so even though in Tokyo Drift, what he was doing had absolutely nothing to do with this new Deckard Shaw character, it is revealed that his death was no accident, but was, Deckard Shaw getting revenge on his brother against Han, along with his attempt to get revenge against the rest of Dominic Toretto's family. So, it's revealed when the trailer first comes out for F9 that Han will be returning. And no matter what, you knew that the explanation for how he came back was going to be utterly absurd. And it was. But at the same time, I'm a little bit ambivalent about how they did it. Because in some ways, I think it's kind of impressive. And in other ways, I mean, it's just absolutely absurd. And the biggest question of all is whether or not it serves justice for Han. Again, if you have no idea what justice for Han is, I talk about that more in the other video. But in a nutshell, it's the idea that he was murdered by this character, Deckard Shaw, who is the villain in Furious 7, but then kind of in 8 and then in Hobbs and Shaw is kind of made to be part of the family. So basically, the justice for Han is, hey, why has this guy been accepted into the family when he killed this beloved character? Again, I can talk more about that in a little bit. But anyway, here's what happens. It is revealed that, well, let me take a quick step back here. So there is a character in this universe named Mr. Nobody. Mr. Nobody is truly like a Das Ex Machina. Like he is on the side of the good guys. He's sort of this like super secret agent played by Kurt Russell. And he basically exists to kind of like hand wave away anything that is remotely hard to understand about the franchise. So he's just kind of there to like give them money, to give them support for the family to kind of go in and do tasks, on his behest. And he's just kind of he's already been used in a bunch of ways to kind of just like get people out of jams where, like, for example, Hobbs and Shaw are both in prison in Fate of the Furious, and he just like gets them out of this maximum security prison. So it's sort of like no task is too big. He can always do something. I'm a little bit disappointed in myself that when I ran through all the different predictions of what happened and how Han was alive, that I did not consider the possibility and the involvement of Mr. Nobody, which really I should have, because they had spent all this time with this character. I think, honestly, I dislike the use of the character so much and how lazy the character is that I just kind of like didn't even entertain that possibility when really I should have. So what happens is, and this is the part of it that I kind of like. So when they bring Han back in this movie, they don't just bring him back and say like, oh hey, he's back now and here's how he's back. They actually tie the reason for both his death and also the reason for his return into the larger narrative of the film, which I think is smart. And I think that even though it can frequently be very ineloquent, one thing that I do really enjoy about the Fast and Furious franchise is no matter how big and how ridiculous it is, they kind of have a tendency to use every part of the buffalo, where they really want to take minor characters, minor events, and find ways to somehow make them work. I mean, make them work in quotes, because it's not good, but it's something. It's like they are at the very least paying attention to their own story. They're not just like, oh yeah, I guess whatever about that character. It's like they actually do think about it the way that ridiculous people like me think about it. So anyway, the main antagonist in F9 is Jacob Toretto, who is Dominic Toretto's brother, who we've never met or heard about before. Where basically he and Dom had this falling out. He kind of leaves town, and then after spending his life living in Dom's shadow, he joins, some Secret Service type thing. He's working basically on behalf of Mr. Nobody and ends up betraying Mr. Nobody. When he betrays Mr. Nobody, he kind of steals what is like the MacGuffin of the film, which is this thing. I actually wrote down the name because I was a little bit confused by it. It's called something Ares. Project Ares. Okay. So Project Ares is basically some kind of computer thing that does whatever and takes over anything that has a computer. It doesn't matter. It's this thing that was basically split into two halves. And the key to control it is in an unknown place. So it turns out that it was actually, this device was made by these two inventors who had a young daughter. And the key to unlocking this thing is actually in the daughter's DNA. So Mr. Nobody, while Han is kind of adrift in Tokyo after the death of Giselle, gets basically brought on board by Mr. Nobody. Mr. Nobody says, hey, we got this guy who went rogue. I need your help. Can you go extract, the Project Ares thing? While Han is there on his way trying to extract it, the girl's parents get killed. Han ends up protecting the girl and saving her life. And then it is to protect both Han and the girl, because the girl, again, is like the key to unlocking this mega weapon. The guys, Mr. Nobody says, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to fake your own death as a way of protecting the two of you. And then the reason that they end up, again, needing to kind of come back is because the bad guys are actually looking for the girl, and the girl is being protected by Han. And the actual how of how the thing was faked is truly yada yada away. So they basically show again the death of, or the attempted murder, where it is Shaw crashing into Han's car flipping over, and then the car exploding. Except literally all they show is at one point Han's in the car, and then you see legs walk past, and then he's just not in it anymore. And then it pans over to like 100 feet away, where it's Mr. Nobody and it's Han, and they're just kind of looking at the wreckage. And Han's like, oh, nice magic trick. And then Mr. Nobody's like, oh, it's not my best work. And like, it almost, him saying it wasn't his best work almost felt like a meta admission from the creators, that they were like, yeah, we know we couldn't really actually come up with like a good way of doing this. Like, it's like, oh, it's a magic trick, but it's like, but how? Like, was there a fake body in the car? Was he somehow dragged away? Was he like a hologram? Like, they just don't tell you. So this is, again, it's fine, because ultimately all I really care about is Han being back in the Fast and Furious universe. However they wanted to do it, however much they wanted to yada yada, it was fine with me. Just get my dude back in there. But if you actually think about it, and that's probably my problem, is thinking about it, what happens is you have Han is working for some low-level Yakuza wannabe. At the exact same moment that low-level Yakuza wannabe finds out that Han is stealing from him and begins chasing him through the streets of Tokyo, he is also being hunted down by Deckard Shaw, who is attempting to get revenge on Han and the rest of the family for hurting his brother. And then at the same time as those two things are happening, you also have this third completely unrelated thing, which is Mr. Nobody trying to basically, witness protection him to get him to pretend he's dead to protect this, this girl who's, whatever. So they didn't exactly find a way to like bring it all together super neatly. The thing that I had thought was going to be the most likely was going to be something where, for whatever reason, Shaw himself was actually faking Han's death. Like, maybe it had something to do with like British government or something like that. It wouldn't have made a ton of sense, but it would have kind of been, in my mind, the only true way to have justice for Han, because then you would have had it so that instead of Shaw actively trying to kill Han, he was actually trying to save Han. That it was not the case. So in that regard, truly justice for Han was not served. They do, however, hint at something at the very end of the movie, and what exactly they're hinting at is a little unclear. So Jason Statham was not credited as appearing in Fast and Furious 9. However, mid-credit stinger, he's shown beating up some guy inside a punching bag. There's like a man inside a punching bag, and he's like, wrecking him. And then all of a sudden, there's a knock on the door, and he goes and he answers it. And who's at the door but Han? And he kind of gets this look of like, oh no. And it's a little unclear in that moment exactly what they're implying is about to happen. Obviously, it seems like that's something that they're setting up for the final part of the franchise. There is a question of whether this means that it's just like him to be there to be like, hey, I'm getting revenge now, or if it's him being there to be like, hey, there's actually was something more sinister going on, and you and I were somehow in on something together. I certainly hope that's not the case. I hope it's not a situation where Han, for some reason, like blamed Dom for Giselle dying, and it turned out that he was actually trying to help Shaw. Like that would kind of be weird. Like to me, Han is too pure of a character, and I don't like this idea that we would just be retrofitting his life once again to make him somehow like a bad guy or even like a little bad. Like I don't care for that. So was justice for Han served? I'm going to say TBD. Ultimately the movie has gotten, the whole franchise has gotten so absurd at this point that like, whatever, it doesn't really matter very much, one way or the other. It's just kind of like, the story has gone so off the rails that I think it's a little bit beyond saving. But yeah, I don't know. It was fun. I was happy to see him back. We'll see if they can come up with a even more eloquent solution for the whole justice for Han thing. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up here. I'll spend a little bit more time talking about the movie in general. I have a lot of thoughts about it, as you can tell. If you haven't already and you enjoyed this, please go ahead and hit like and subscribe. I usually release a new video every single Wednesday where I put a little bit more into my editing and everything like that. This is just a quick thing I wanted to get out there and talk about. Did you see the movie? What did you think about the whole Justice for Han thing? What did you think about how they brought him back from the dead? Leave a comment. Let me know. I'm very excited to talk with people about this because, what else am I going to talk about? All right, guys. Thanks so much. Talk soon.